I wanted to do a little video about how I make my moist bedding. I learned a bit of doing this from Tom, the maker of Vermibag, and you can find details on his YouTube channel. But it's really quite simple. I fill up my tote, plastic tote, with water, and this coco coir comes in an 11-pound brick. The one that I like to use, I hope it, okay, Mag Joe Natural. And the reason I like this is because they double rinse this, so they remove the majority of the salt, which is important because salt is detrimental to your worms, and it's not all that great in your garden either. So I'm going to take this brick and I'm going to put this in the water so it can expand. So I'm going to just soak it enough to remove what I need. It's going to have to be like really wet, like a paste-like, because I'm going to incorporate dry paper and cardboard into here, as well as some oyster shell for pH balance and alfalfa meal for the nitrogen part. You can also add coffee grounds, used coffee grounds, an eggshell, whatever you have and whatever you use in your garden. This is what I use in my garden. So once I like the consistency of this, I will remove the rest of the block and I will just put it here in my mortar tray for my next batch, because I know I'm not going to use all of this, just enough to make bedding for this particular bin. And let me show you what that looks like once I have enough of the coconut coir in here before I add the rest of the material. Okay, so here is our coconut coir, and you can see there's a lot of liquid here, and this is the way I like it because a lot of dry material is going to go in here. So this is paste-like, very wet, but this is the amount of coconut coir that I need. And again, if I need more, I can always go back here and re-wet some and take what I need. But this is how I start this process. So now I'm going to start adding alfalfa meal and the oyster shell to this. And again, we are not baking here, so there's no exact amount that you need to add, whatever you want. But I'm adding 3 scoops of, I think it's 1/8, is it 1/8 cup? Yeah, 1/8 cup, so about 3 scoops of that. And then I have my alfalfa meal. So we'll do three of these little cups here before we start adding our dry material. Now I also use a couple of handfuls of castings, ready castings. Something I wanted to say about castings: if you want your worm population to be pure and you have more than one breed of worms, I suggest that you know which castings came from what bin, from what breed of worms, because when you add bedding that you put castings into, you may have cross-contamination if you don't keep track of what kind of worms you have. So if you choose to, you can just omit the castings that's fine too. The nitrogen in the alfalfa, and if you try to add coffee grounds, that'll start the process cooking anyway. So you don't need necessarily to add the castings. You can also use some compost, store-bought compost if you like. And now I'm going to add the dry material in here. This is mostly paper. I do have cardboard as well. And this is all going to get incorporated in here. And before you know it, all that moisture, all that wetness is going to be absorbed into this bedding, into the paper. It's not going to clump. That's why I don't wet my paper first. I mix the paper dry into the coconut coir, and that way it's all nice and incorporated and it doesn't clump together. And I think I have some cardboard here. This cardboard is a little bit larger. This is from my old shredder, so the pieces are a bit larger. And then if you see that it's getting dry, you can always add more water. But when you're doing it in steps like this, then everything has a chance to absorb equally. Now you can add, as I said before, you can add anything that you have. If you use azomite, if you have diatomaceous earth, you can use that. Whatever your house produces, whatever you like to put in your garden, absolutely use that for pH buffer and grit and all that. A little bit more cardboard. And what's going to happen is I will come here once a day and just toss the material to make sure that it stays fluffy, aerated, and doesn't get anaerobic. I will let it sit for a week. You can let it sit for much longer than that. I think Tom said he lets his sit for a month or more. I'm not that patient, but this will also prevent the worms from getting hurt if the material heats up, because within the first few days it can heat up and go through its heating process, and then by the time you're ready to feed it, it's already going to be perfectly good for your bins and for your worms. So there we go. And I'm done here. And I'm just going to cover it up. I'm going to leave it come and toss it around once a day. And that's it. It's really simple. And I found that my worms really, really love this stuff. So you can adapt it to your own needs, but this is just a little general idea of how I do this.